everyone, and welcome to another episode of Traditionally Speaking. My name is Tom, and my good friend Joe and I are going to be discussing with you in this episode Advent calendars.
And there is so much to discuss. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever a mainstay of the lead up to Christmas, it has to be the Advent calendar. And it's one that has a very long history because, like so many other Christmas traditions, it goes back to organised religion and the German Lutheran Church because they were the first people to publicise the Advent calendar in the 19th century. And at that point, it was quite a simple thing. It was paper or card, and you would find a little picture or some scripture behind it. But within a few years, other denominations were using them, and now, of course, anyone can use them. They're a kind of non-denominational, even secular thing that people have come to enjoy, and to the point, in fact, that it's hard to imagine Christmas without them.
And actually, Tom, it even dates back before that because the whole Advent countdown idea came out of the early 19th century from the German Protestants. At that time, they were, they would either like burn a candle or mark the day by marking on the walls and that kind of thing. So even before it was printed, they were practicing Advent, which is, of course, the time leading up to Christ's arrival on earth. So it starts really from early 19th century, but as you said, the Germans are the first ones to have printed it, starting with Gerhard Lang back in the early 1900s.
And that's the amazing thing, because I think we've all become so used to our Advent calendars running from the 1st of December up to Christmas Eve or possibly Christmas Day. Originally, they tended to run from the first Sunday of Advent, which tended to be around the 27th of November. So it seems odd to think that used to be the tradition.
Yeah, and truly, I mean, they started denoting each week as a particular week leading up to Christ's birth, and they started to break into things, where they would do like the first week was hope, the second week was faith, the third week was joy, and the fourth week was peace. And then, of course, that's kind of changed through the years too. And some people do the prophets the first week, the angels the second, the shepherds the third, and the magi the fourth. So depending on different religious aspects and different ways of celebrating, they found a lot of ways to incorporate Advent. And it has definitely become a very steady tradition every year. And as you said, it begins the end of November, basically, and runs right up to December 24th, which is, of course, Christmas Eve. And then the 25th, we celebrate the birth.
Absolutely. And one of the best things about Advent calendars, of course, is the fact that manufacturers have adopted so many different new traditions now. We're all familiar with the chocolate Advent calendar, but now you can have them with toiletries and luxuries and electronic gadgets even. Some of them are obviously very expensive and exclusive, but there's no end to the kind of inventiveness that manufacturers are putting into these things.
And it's kind of interesting. You mentioned the chocolate calendars, which always a favorite of mine, but it was Cadbury who launched the chocolate calendar in the UK back in 1971.
Yeah.
And of course, we all know Cadbury over here. They do the chocolate eggs at Easter, the rabbit that clucks like a chicken.
Yes, and there's still a favourite over here, even now, although other chocolate manufacturers are available.
Now, speaking of, you said it's a favorite. Does everybody in Scotland have like Advent calendars? Is that pretty common, or how is that? Go ahead and explain how that works.
Yeah, they're very popular over here. You start to see them in shops round about October. And they will run from the 1st of December up to the 24th or possibly 25th. What is really interesting, though, is in spite of the fact there are all these premium specialised Advent calendars, there's now been a move back almost towards the kind of homemade Advent calendar, the ones that you can reuse every year, where you have a little drawer and you can put a trinket or a little gift into it. And these are really popular now. I think because people have the aspect to personalise it for individual people. If you have young kids, you're obviously aware of what sweets they like and what toys they like, and you're able to just give it that bit more of a personal touch than buying one that's been manufactured.
Well, and actually, my earliest memories when I was, well, never mind, a long, long time ago, but I'd learned about advent calendars actually at school. It was my teachers that would do like advent calendars. My mom and dad were never big on that at home. But I learned about that in school. And of course, now we see them everywhere in the United States. And as you mentioned, almost every kind of calendar you can think of. In fact, Richard Selmer, who came from Stuttgart in the 1950s, he started exporting advent calendars to the U.S. en masse. And in fact, you can still get his original design today that he developed for the United States. Not to mention, he's got 140 different, well, not he, but his company has 140 different varieties today of advent calendars that you can pick. So, I mean, you're right. You can get them with anything you want, any way you want, and as elaborate or as simple as you want. And that's really cool that they're doing it at home now and creating them. I think that's marvelous. Talk about a great tradition to start with your kids.
And the other thing that seems to be making a comeback now, or certainly is coming more into the public eye, is the idea of the installational advent calendar, where somebody uses an entire building or a side of a building with individual windows being used for every day of Advent. And it's something.
Really? Oh, I hadn't seen that or heard of that.
Well,
Where is
yeah.
that being done?
Well, it's an amazing thing because it was popularised by Hallmark Christmas and Evergreen. That's what it was, and in one of the various Hallmark TV movies, it's a theme that runs through the film, and it seems to have kind of given the tradition a bit of a comeback. In that particular film, it's used as a time capsule, so you have all of these items and traditions that are being remembered from, I think, the 1930s in the modern day. And it's rather a nice idea, actually, because it's almost like a reminder of what Christmas was like then.
And that is one of the most important thing about a tradition. And we've had so many wonderful ones over the years. And I would really like to see some of these, continue to grow or expand to other houses and other neighborhoods and stuff. Boy, I'll tell you, wait till we get into the discussion of Christmas lights. There's something that has changed over the years. And boy, talk about a marvelous tradition I would love to see just explode and continue to do. But getting back to the advent calendars, that's a simple way to keep the memory of what we're celebrating and why we're celebrating for an entire month, which I think is marvelous.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a kind of a civic aspect to it now as well. You sometimes see towns or communities sort of banding together to have these big themed advent calendar installations, and I think that's a nice thing because it brings people together. It gives people something to look forward to, when the nights are dark and the weather's cold. There's something to be said for that, I think.
Well, and that's very true because the nights do get dark very quickly, in November, December. And I haven't seen that much, as you've talked about, of towns doing things or really showing the Advent side of this. But boy, I would love to see that if that started happening over here in the US. And, so to our listeners, if your town does something special, or if you have a special event, do us a favor, let us know about it. We'd love to talk about it, or even, maybe post a link to it if you have one, as far as doing some unusual Advent things, and tell us what you're doing at home. Tom mentioned that there's a lot of families that do homemade calendars now. Are you one of them? let us know about that and how you do it and what you do. And we'd love to see pictures. I would anyway. Be happy to see pictures and post. And speaking of our website, Tom, why don't you go ahead and give them that information?
Yes, of course. The website is traditionally-speaking.com, and you'll be able to find out more about the podcast, catch up on previous episodes, and learn a bit more about us.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of information on there, and we're going to be adding more to it as we do these podcasts. You don't be surprised. You're going to get a lot of good information off of that as well. So feel free to visit that often. And as Tom mentioned, if you miss any of our podcasts, you'll find them all there. So take a listen and let us know what you'd like to hear from us on any other traditions that are out there.
Now, another interesting tradition to do with Advent calendars is something that comes out of Scandinavia. And I'm interested to know, Joe, if there's anything in America that's quite like it. But it's a thing that's known as the Nordic Yule calendar. And what it is basically is a themed Advent structure that is articulated through a radio show or a TV show, where there'll be a different episode running from the 1st of the month through to the 24th of the month, usually with a Christmas theme, sometimes for kids, sometimes for adults, sometimes for the whole family. But there's usually a Christmas theme or symbolism in the narrative.
I haven't seen that personally. Again, if our listeners are familiar with that, I'd love to hear more about that and to learn where they do that. But I haven't run across that here. But that kind of follows with the original Advent calendar idea of putting in like a Bible verse for each day to kind of remind you why you're celebrating and what's coming up and what the prophets predicted, and so on. So I would love to see that, but I haven't experienced it myself. No.
Yeah, it's not a thing that we have here in Britain either, but it's hugely popular in places like Iceland, Norway, Denmark, and it has been since the 1950s. So there's been all different kinds of themes and stories told, but it's rather a nice tradition for December.
Well, I would imagine some of the more Swedish towns like like Solvang and that kind of thing in California might do something similar along those lines. Of course, they use an entirely different color for Advent too. More traditionally, it's violet, but I know that Scandinavian countries use a blue. In fact, they call it a sarum blue. And some countries use purple. So we'll have to keep our eyes open to see if we see anything like that here in the US.
It's an amazing thing because it never ceases to astound me how many different types of approach there are to Advent calendars. Something that every time you think you've seen everything with an Advent calendar, there's always something new to discover.
Well, and that's the joy of traditions, is they sometimes expand and you do different things, and it's kind of fun to take and put your own spin on things, which is also what's so great about doing it in the family, is you can add your own thing that you want to do and make it particularly special for your kids or your family or your relatives. And that's something that I love to see, and just love to see that expand and come up with new ideas.
I agree with you absolutely, and especially when the whole community comes together to make it happen, because there's always something really nice about Christmas having that kind of communal aspect.
And that is one of the reasons I think why Christmas has lasted through the ages, and it is one thing, and a lot of people complain about the rush and the busyness of Christmas and everything. But if you take the time to do some wonderful traditions, and if you take the time to really think about what Christmas is all about and what kind of joy you're providing and the memories you're giving your kids, there's nothing more special than doing traditions with your kids and having them remember that when they're in their adulthood and older and raising their own kids or your grandkids.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about the Advent calendar, isn't it? It's the fact that it gives you that sense of anticipation for Christmas. I
And you
mean,
can share it amongst the family, which is always wonderful. So,
absolutely.
especially if you have a lot of chocolate around, then, we could just keep putting it in the thing and reopening it. So,
Yeah. To be honest, we could almost have a separate episode about the different types of chocolate calendar that are over here, because there are certainly plenty of them.
oh my gosh, could you imagine? Yeah, we should do something like that. Boy, we could just talk about the different candies and the different treats that you can get. Oh man, I'm sure over in your country, but ours as well. We love our sweets.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that's one of the beauties of a Scottish Advent calendar, is that I'm told there is a whiskey Advent calendar with little miniature whiskey drums behind each door. So
Ooh.
that's a very uniquely Scottish Advent calendar.
I'll have to be on the lookout for one of those. Well, I think we've pretty much covered the Advent calendar side of this. And again, I invite our listeners to, let us know what their experiences are and what they do that's different. Man, I'll tell you, it'll be fun to share with other listeners and readers the different types of traditions that are out there.
Yes, I agree completely. And if you at home have a wonderful Christmas memory of an Advent calendar in your youth, or just a really special experience of when you were growing up, please get in touch, let us know about it.
Yeah, we'd love to hear that. So, well, I thank everybody for joining us again for another special podcast. And I hope you're enjoying this as much as Tom and I are. I'm learning so many new things. Certainly not even, about the way things are done in Scotland and other parts of the world, but even in the US, I'm learning things and going, wow, I never knew that. So I hope you're getting a lot out of this too, listeners, and join us for our next podcast.
Thanks, everyone. I hope that you'll come back and join us soon for another Christmas topic.
Goodbye, everyone. Until next time.